Artists, I'm guessing that you may have taken a selfie before, but have you made a self-portrait, a piece of art about yourself? If you have, I bet you've never tried with this type of art called a mosaic. Let's get started. Let's take a moment to review the rubric, which has the learning targets. Inspired by Roman mosaics, students will create a self-portrait with tiles. You can see these portraits are composed of little pieces, in this case, of stone. Here are the goals for the project. First, we're going to be tracing a picture of you onto a transparency. Next, you are going to mix a selection of different neutral colors to represent your skin, hair, and clothing colors. Then you're going to be using sponges, kind of like those tesserae, to stamp little tiles to give your self-portrait the appearance of a mosaic. The first step in the project is to take a photograph. You can see here I have a picture of myself, and take what is called transparency film. And this is just transparent plastic that you can set on top of your portrait. The goal of this step is to capture the main contour lines of your face, your hair, and any part of your body that might appear in your photograph. Here we go. Artist, after you've gone over the main contour lines, you can check your art on a piece of white paper and you can see if all of the essentials are there. Now, I did not include, in my case, every wrinkle. You may or may not want to include every little detail on your face, but we're looking for the main features that you have. The next step I'm going to actually do for you, we're going to take these contour drawings and photocopy them larger onto a piece of art paper so that we have plenty of space to stamp our tiles. Artists, once the contour drawings are enlarged, they look something like this, and you'll see it just has almost like the feeling of a coloring book. And so we're going to be starting with our skin and hair to begin, and then moving on to any other features or the background of your art. For this step, you're going to need some scratch paper, your photograph as a reference, and then a selection of colors. Now, you may notice something about these colors. They are all neutrals, and our hair and skin is typically a combination of neutrals if you've got a natural color. Of course, if you dye your hair, you might have some purple or some blue or something else. Now, when you look at your photo, you'll also notice that you are not just one single color. There are usually lights and dark parts to your face. Usually the parts that stick out the most, like your nose or maybe your cheeks, might look the lightest. And then there's usually shadow or shading maybe around the edges, maybe under your hair, your neck, or down by where your clothes shadow your skin a little bit. You are going to spend a moment and see if you can either use any of these colors for a pretty close match or a few of them, or you can also mix some colors. So go ahead and explore that now. Artists, when I explored a little bit, I think I've got a range of colors here that I see on my skin, shadows with my hair, and so I'll be using these. The next step after you've kind of figured out your colors is to practice using your tiles. So as you can see from these portraits, the artists or mosaicists used little tiny square tesserae, and you can see that those are actually different colors as well. Some lights, some mediums, some darks, all of those making what looks like a 3D face. Now the sizes of the tiles vary a bit, and so we have little sponges cut in different sizes and shapes that might be helpful for filling in the contour drawing that you have of yourself. So what I'd like you to do next is just practice using a couple of these and seeing if you can get it to make what would be a rectangle or tile shape. Now it's going to be somewhat rough. It probably won't be a perfect rectangle, but the more you practice, the more you get a sense of what you need to do to get a pretty clear shape. So go ahead and take a couple minutes and practice with your tiles. Now I've discovered a couple things as I'm going, and it's good to kind of figure out a technique. I've noticed that when I dip in, if I just wipe the edge off a little bit and then press, do kind of a little wiggle, I can get a pretty clear rectangle shape. Now you'll notice I'm also trying to leave some space, just a little bit, in between the tiles. I don't want to just stamp these on top of each other, right? Because that's not going to look at all like a mosaic. I should be able to see what represents the individual tiles and also the space in between, which usually has kind of a cement product like grout in between. So if you need to, go ahead and keep practicing until you've got a technique where you can get pretty close to a rectangle shape and also a consistent space in between. I will be honest with you, this isn't going to be a project that is super fast because we do want to lay these on carefully. Now that I've practiced a bit, I've decided that I'm probably going to do my face because it does appear kind of small in this drawing with a pretty tiny little stamper. These are just made from some recycled packing materials. And so I'm going to go ahead and start to fill in just my face and hair. Here's my process. Artist, you can see I have my skin and hair done so far. There are a few places like my eyes where the space is just so tiny, I don't think I can use one of the sponges. So I'm going to use just a little brush to fill in my eyes and lips. Artist, the next step is to move on to our clothing and anything else that we've drawn in the front. Remember that when you do your clothing, it does not have to look like the original outfit you were wearing. So for example, my shirt has these little tiny rainbows, which would be way too difficult to try and do in little miniature form. So I will probably just pick a solid color for my shirt. You could also give it a pattern if you prefer. So let's go ahead and do the next step. All right, artists, I am moving on now to the background. I'm going to come back to my shirt in just a moment. And you can see here that I took this picture on my front porch. However, I am not at all limited to making this somehow realistic in the background. You can see from these traditional Roman designs that the mosaicists also took the liberty to just create some sort of pattern. This almost has like a circular halo type shape. So you can be very creative on the background. You can also likely switch to a bigger stamp for the background because there's more space, and it's going to be a little bit easier to stamp without going on the black line of the Sharpie. So I'm going to do some sort of pattern in the background, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. All right, artists, well, this is what I ended up with. It is pretty bright, maybe even a little brighter than I intended, but as the art teacher, I figure it's probably okay to have a giant burst of color. I look forward to seeing how your self-portraits look. Happy creating.